Okay, welcome to the Hanson Board of Selectmen meeting. Tonight is January 7th, 2020, and I would like it if you would please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I am so excited I can barely contain myself tonight, and I may not. So that's just a warning. So before we have the swearing in of John Stanbrook, I just wanted to read a brief little statement. So this board has accomplished a lot in the past year, but I think the most important thing that we accomplished was with the help of the lovely and talented Mary Marini and Greer Getson, laying a foundation for the future. And that future is sitting at the other end of the table in the person of John Stanbrook. We did an exhaustive search, and we're ushering in 2020 with our new town administrator. He comes to us with impeccable credentials and years of diverse municipal experience and skills, which we know will serve us in good stead. He'll be joining our executive assistant, Greer Getson, as part of our team, and we couldn't be more thrilled. And I hope you'll all join me in welcoming John to Hanson. If you want to do the swearing in, Beth. And hopefully he'll take the oath. Because
Raise your right hand, John. State the oath. The end needed. Yes. Okay. You, John Stanbrook, solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as town administrator to the best of your abilities in accordance with the bylaws of the town and the laws of the Commonwealth.
Yes, I will.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I'm not a big speechifying person. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'd like to say thank you to my wife and my son who are here tonight. My daughter couldn't make it tonight, but she's wanted to be here. So I'm looking forward to working here.
Are we going to break for a snack?
Going very well. It's 200,000 more. I'm glad to be here.
So kind of son. Sworn in today.
Matt, Greer, and John. I'd like to just take a picture right where John is of the three of you together, if you don't mind. Greer, stand up, please.
Oh.
I guess we're all the new hires.
I'm not sure.
We'll have the beauty in the middle.
Thank you.
great, thank you, Mr. Bloss.
Thank you.
Well, keeping on the good news train, we had an incident on New Year's Eve while many of us were.
Wait till 7.
Pardon?
You gotta wait till 7 till the boys get here.
What do you say?
We're breaking for food right now.
I have cake.
I'm sorry. You know me, I just wanted to cut right to the good part. For me, it's not the cake. I want a no-carb thing, so.
On this end of the table, cake is important.
Hold that thought. We're going to break right now, and we will come back with more to come.
With cake.
Thank you, Carol. Carol, hopefully you can edit that. Okay. I forgot about that.
Start at 7.
Yeah. Welcome back to the January 7th, 2020 meeting. We just swore in our new town administrator, John Stanbrook, and keeping on the good news train for Hanson. On New Year's Eve, while many of us were home enjoying our festivities, our first responders were facing a life and death drama on McQuon Pond. And I've asked the police and fire chiefs as well as the personnel involved in this event to join us tonight so that the board can express its heartfelt gratitude for the life-saving measures that they took that evening. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Thompson. And then Mr. Mitchell would like to say a few words.
Thanks for having us here tonight. We appreciate the recognition. This is something that we do every day as a job. However, this call that night was more than routine. I'm just going to read the press release, and then I'll just go a little bit off that. So, at 10:35 on December 31st, the Emergency Communications Center received a report of people yelling from the area of the water on McQuon Pond. Crews arrived on scene to find two male parties approximately 100 yards offshore in an open water area holding onto a capsized vessel. Firefighters in survival suits deployed an ice rescue sled and were able to reach the parties that were in the cold water for an unknown amount of time. The combination of ice and open water made this rescue difficult. The coordinated effort of fire and police personnel on scene to pull the firefighters and victims to shore contributed to this positive outcome. Both men were transported to South Shore Hospital for exposure by Hanover and Pembroke ambulances, and a Whitman ambulance evaluated our firefighters. We were assisted at the scene by Hanson Police. So that's our press release. But from the beginning of this call, from the dispatch receiving this call, getting all the pertinent information, relaying it to the crews out on the street, the police officers getting there and locating these individuals quickly, which they had to get on a path to get to find them. We were assisted by some bystanders who did a really good job attempting to help us. And then the firefighters showed up. This was very labor intensive. They didn't have enough. There was not enough ice to hold their weight, but it was too big for them to break easily. So it took some time for our firefighters to get out there. And once they get out there and grab the gentleman, they get pulled in by rope. And that was a coordinated effort on shore by police and fire. So truly, this is a team effort. This is something that is very labor intensive, takes a lot of resources. And just that cooperative effort was unbelievable, and that definitely contributed to this being a positive event. So just a job well done. This is something that that happened every day. It's not routine, and definitely made a difference that night, and it was great work.
Yep.
One other thing I'd like to point out is when we have an incident like this, we depend on mutual aid. We do not have the resources to handle a big event like this, like all our surrounding towns. So we're able to utilize out-of-town's ambulances to help us, which is a huge asset for us. So thank you for having us, and awesome job. Great job.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you, Chief Thompson. So I listened that night. I listened to the whole thing, everything from the first call coming into Bruce to dispatch with multiple calls with people out there screaming, and then I think Leo was the first one out there that identified, Officer Arsenal identified there was somebody out there. But just listening to you guys work together, it was just unbelievable, really. It was. You know, the police relaying to dispatch, letting fire know, you know, Bruce was getting bombarded by calls, and it was just great to listen to. And so because I have a scanner, you know, I'm obviously a first responder expert, right? Because I listen to it all the time, and, you know, I should have been command that night in the beginning of the call. But anyways, there's a few things that I learned that night that makes that maybe not necessarily true. So one of the first things that I heard was, I heard a Hanson police officer, he was on Woodman Terrace, and he came across a very generous resident that was willing to launch his boat into the pond and assist in the rescue. So me, you know, being the first responder expert at home, I'm going, yes, great, they're gonna reach this guy, they're gonna get him out of the water. Wrong. Cal's here somewhere. Sergeant Calgero comes on the radio and he says, listen, before we do that, maybe we should let Hanson Fire get their boat in the water because we already have one overturned vessel. So I'm like, yeah, that's why Cal's got the stripes and I don't. You know? So one of the other things that I heard, and I'm listening, and I'll tell you, all kidding aside, there was a point where I wasn't sure if you guys were going to get to him. It was that much pressure. It was really intense. So the other thing I remember is Chief Thompson, he's calling for mutual aid ambulance. He called Pembroke, he called Hanover, and he called Whitman. And I'm thinking, there's only 2 victims out there. Why do we need 3 ambulances? Well, if I shut up and listen, then I figured it out real quickly. Chief Thompson had an ambulance for each victim when they came out of the water, plus he wanted an additional ambulance to check out his fire personnel when they came out of the water. You know, so there's just certain things that you guys, that I hear that I don't know what's going on, and there's certain things that you guys say that lead up to other things. And just because I have a scanner, I'm not an expert. So I just want to say what a hell of a job by everybody, Bruce, fire. It was unbelievable to hear. So
I'm glad none of you were injured in the process.
and you know what? It wasn't one. It wasn't one. It was 2 saves. So great job, guys.
Yep. No, feel free. Carol, we're going to take a brief recess.
We would like everybody. Come on. If you guys line up and line here.
I thought we were skipping those.
Okay, welcome back to the Tuesday, January 7th, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting. We are now going to move to Mr. Bloss, who will read our public announcements and upcoming meetings.
Thank you. The next Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Meeting will be held on Thursday, January 9th at 1 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room. Residents and business owners interested in planning for the effects of climate change are welcome to attend. The group will be selecting a date for the upcoming 6-hour workshop in February. Open burning season will begin January 15th and will run until April 30th. Permits are now available at Fire Headquarters, 505 Liberty Street, daily from 9 to 5. The cost of a permit is $20, payable by check or money order made out to the town of Hanson. No cash will be accepted. Finally, the Friesen for a Reason Polar Plunge fundraiser will take place on January 26, 2020 at 1 p.m. at Cranberry Cove to benefit the Hanson Parent-Teacher Organization. Bad weather alternate date of February 2nd, 2020. Participants must register prior to the event at eventbrite.com. The first 75 participants to register will receive a winter hat. Volunteers are needed on the following committees: 200th Anniversary, Capital Improvement, Conservation Commission regular and 2 associate members, Cultural Council, Disabilities, Economic Development, Finance, Highway Building Committee, Historical Commission, Memorial Day Patriotic Observance, Memorial Field Trustees, North River Commission, and Zoning Board Alternate. Applications for appointment and info on the committee is available on the town website, www.hanson-ma.gov. Upcoming meetings: Wednesday, January 8th at 7 p.m., the Community Preservation Committee. Wednesday, January 8th at 7 p.m., the Historical Commission. Tuesday, January 14th at 2020 at 7 p.m., Wage and Personnel. And Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, the Board of Selectmen at 7 p.m.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bloss. And with that, Mary, we're going to move on to opening the May special and annual town meeting warrants. And is there a particular motion that we should be making?
Just a motion to open the warrants for the 2 meetings, and let me just check the date. I think I didn't write it down. The 10th, the 13th. The articles are due the 13th, right?
Yeah, and I think that the warrant is on the 17th.
And then we'll officially, the 17th? Yeah. We're going to say the articles are due on March 13th,
Okay.
and the warrant will close on the 17th. But a memo will go out to everybody just in case I have these dates wrong, because I didn't write them down.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Second.
Okay, I applaud everybody's vigor. Did I get a second? Yep. Okay, all in favor? Okay, fantastic. Moving right along, Mr. Dyer, we are going to speak about the Bay Circuit Trail discussion, and I assume Mr. Clements is also here for that discussion as well?
Yes, Ms. Chair.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so for the Bay Circuit Trail, for those who don't know, I also serve on the final Plymouth County Reuse Committee with Mr. Clemens here. He's our clerk. So we wanted to come before the Board of Selectmen tonight just to seek permission to run the Bay Circuit Trail through Plymouth County Hospital and to quickly go over what the Bay Circuit Trail is. It's a regional trail system going from the North Shore all the way down to the South Shore, ending in Kingston, goes through 37 communities, and it's about over 200 miles. So with that being said, all right, well, I guess Microsoft had a different idea of how to interpret this. The Bay Circuit Trail, if you rotate your head 90 degrees, you will see that. So coming from East Bridgewater being top of the screen, I believe, and then coming right through as where Mr. Bloss is, going through the Nowazowski property, through Burridge, up to High Street, crossing over 27 on the railroad tracks.
Got fast.
There you go. Right now it currently runs up High Street. So as you can see right now, the blue line being the current trail. The left-hand side is where Town Hall is, so kind of going up High Street towards the police station. You will see that the blue line is the current trail. What we're proposing is to run it up Bonney Hill Lane. There is an easement right there, yep, exactly where Wes's hand is, going through this property onto Plymouth County property, running along the eastern border, right along the fence line for the most part, and then coming up and out over to Robinson, right? Pierce. Pierce Ave. So with that being said, we were coming before you to get your permission with doing so because we have a grant coming up that's due in February. So we wanted to receive your approval and the support of the board and have John sign off on a letter of support moving forward. With it being a grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's the Mass Trails Grant. They give out from anywhere to $1,000 up to $300,000 depending on the trail and the significance to the Commonwealth. Upfront costs, they say there's a 20% match, but that can be paid in volunteer in lieu of services. So the trail itself is just going to be about a mile running through Plymouth County Hospital, as you saw, and then it will consist of bog walks, pavement, and dirt trails and gravel. And then just to prove that we have access for easement, here is the Registry of Deeds document for the easement for Bonney Hill Lane. It's a 10-foot wide path highlighted in yellow. Thank you, Mr.
And is there
Bloss.
somebody's, I'm trying to, is this actually somebody's property that they live on? Like, does somebody live there?
Correct.
And are they aware of these plans?
I can speak to that somewhat. Way back in 2002, the land at the end of Bonney Hill Lane was subdivided from one lot to three. And as a condition for approval for that by the planning board, they required the creation of this 10-foot wide foot trail only easement from the end of Bonney Hill Lane to the property line. If people who have bought the property since, I don't know if it's different people or the same, there has been a legal and, as Matt says, a recorded at the Registry of Deeds documentation of this in a 3-page verbal description of the situation. That's been a matter of record for 17 years. What we wanted to do is certainly inform and engage neighbors, but we need to do things in a certain order. It would be premature to do that if we didn't have the blessing of town leadership. But the framework was laid 17 years ago, and we stayed around long enough to hopefully see it through.
I have no doubt that legally we've got access, and I love this plan. I love the fact that it checks off so many different boxes, and that it's taking people off of that really busy high street and tucking them into a beautiful little piece of property that they otherwise really wouldn't have an opportunity to go on. I just want to make sure that we all know, and you know probably best of all, Mr. Clements, people don't always read those deeds. They don't always know about the easements, and if they do, they always think, it's never going to happen in my lifetime. So I just want to make sure that we're engaging. It sounds like you guys are planning on doing that. If we do,
I think that there's also a drainage easement pretty much in the same area.
Yes.
And it is, frankly, a little bit wet, a modest boardwalk.
Yeah.
Required. And back 70 years ago, I remember the question came up from the neighbors, would there be parking on White Hill? And the answer is no. There'd be plenty of parking down at the old hospital site. This would be simply access for foot traffic. In fact, that neighborhood would be probably the most appreciative customers of this coming into existence. And so we hope it actually is a win for everyone in the picture.
So do you guys envision having like an information session with neighbors? Or I'm just trying to, I recall several years ago, and I believe you were on the Conservation Commission along with my husband when this happened, that people had proposed a boat launch site off of the street down near State Street. Yeah, Adams Circle, and it was not welcomed with open arms by the neighbors. They felt that maybe unruly boaters might, go down there, they might party, they might destroy their property and that type of thing. And I'm not suggesting that this is what's going to happen here, but you just don't know. People, change is difficult for people, and maybe thinking that people aren't going through your backyard, and now all of a sudden you're thinking, and obviously the people that are going to be hiking the Bay Circuit Trail, I would not, characterize as heavy partiers. They're probably just communing with nature and, trying to appreciate the natural resources. So what I'm hearing you guys say is you will engage, you'll have conversations, and maybe we can address with signage and some other types
Absolutely. It's actually an opportunity to, again, uplift not only the quality of life in the town, but the whole neighborhood. And one of our community members actually lives on Bonney Hill Lane. And so I think that there's every reason to, and every ability to engage the neighborhood and the larger community. And we look forward to that.
Okay, that sounds great. And I've just got another question. So I'm just thinking about process. When the Bay Circuit Trail gets changed, if we move forward with this and everybody agrees, is there a deed restriction that goes on the property, or what happens with that?
What we have already is this recorded, I guess it has the equivalent weight of a deed, easement agreement, 3-page agreement, which Matt really gave a copy of, which has the law, but it also says that the property owner is allowed to continue to enjoy the use of the property to the extent it doesn't interfere with the others using that pedestrian.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant, do we need to give something to the Bay Circuit Trail folks saying, like, hey, we're setting this land aside in perpetuity, or?
The way it works is this. I actually sit on the one of the Bay Circuit Advisory Committee. Overall, people from Newburyport all the way down to here look at all proposed changes and agree whether it does or doesn't make sense. This checks off all the boxes. I'm sure
Okay.
it'll totally work.
Yeah.
And what happens is, as a non-profit organization, the Appalachian Mountain Club, which now oversees the Bay Circuit Alliance and the Bay Circuit Trail, would simply update their documents and their trail guides, but virtually every piece of the Bay Circuit Trail depends on the local entity simply making it available and agreeing to work with the Bay Circuit Advisory Board and things like that. That's so in place, it's easy to take for granted, but it's important to know that this is a classic case of things that they would say yes to get a mile trail off of a road with no sidewalk.
Definitely, yeah.
Into a
yeah.
place like this, because it's actually the Bay Circuit Trail and Greenway.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just a 10-foot wide trail that's 200 miles long. The concept behind it for years and for decades has been to advocate for protection of parcels, which you simply link by means of the trail. And in this case, we have a very nice parcel that could become part of that.
I think it's a great idea. I love it. I just was asking because I didn't know. I always try to play devil's advocate, and I'm thinking, is somebody going to say, well, now we lose that piece of property forever, and if we decide to do something different with it, we never can, even though we all know that it's pretty wet back there, and you know.
My bottom line is that as we spent, the conservation spent $7,000 a couple of years ago to have the Congress to look at the whole property and take input from the community. And that part of their work was designed to develop a park for the heart of Hanson. And while that's mostly areas to the south of it, then the meadows and the there still will exist. And there was a lot of community support for all of these things at that time. And what we're doing tonight is being driven quite a bit by the once-a-year opportunity. But we see this as being complementary to the other elements of the park, which would be more concentrated at the southern end, and which I hope the committee will bring before the selectmen in very short order.
We do too, and we're hoping for something on May town meeting. I'm on the record several times as saying that. But also, I'm wondering, do you think that there's future grant opportunities? I know you're looking for something this February, but is that something maybe you'd go back next year and look?
Another one that will be due around the 1st of July. A different state agency, again, very complementary to this. Within the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, there's numerous initiatives, many of which have grants associated with them. And we think we have a piece of the puzzle for all of those agencies. So we will be applying for others as well.
I think it's fantastic. Did anybody else have any other questions?
I do. Matt, is it possible to go back to the other slide with Plymouth County Hospital? Okay, so the orange dot is where you want the trail to be. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea, especially since getting people off High Street. But with the property up there, would there be any effect, with a future park or a solar field going in?
That's a great question. So right at the moment, the committee's not ready to avail the draft version of it. But what we can say is that the committee supported the trail going in here. And as you can kind of see, we kind of pushed it to the borders of the property.
Yeah.
So that way, if we come to the Board of Selectmen and we decide, no, that's not what we want, and things change, I don't see the trail impacting or impeding on any future plans if we change our mind about passive recreation up there or solar fields or whatever the case may be.
This is the easiest thing to move of all the things we've been talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's only on paper now, and we're just looking for permission to apply for the grant.
Any other questions? I just want to thank you guys and the whole, final reuse, Plymouth County Reuse Committee for chugging along and keeping it going, and we can't wait to see what else you're going to unveil, and this is a great step. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Okay.
I guess in terms of administration, probably as Matt would drive this, but what we foresee is requesting the equivalent of a support letter for the grant.
All right, so
sometime within the next week we can have.
all right, so we're in favor of it, but why don't we also have a motion directing John to sign on our behalf a letter of support? So I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Clements, and thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, 2020 annual license renewal. I think we must just be truing up a few little stragglers that didn't hit our other list.
Right.
We've got Upscale Autos and Capellini Collision, Class 2, and Hanson Manor, which is a lodging house.
Have we gotten anything from Hanson Manor yet? No. Okay, so not Hanson Manor, that will be tabled until we get your stuff.
Okay, and just to confirm, there are no outstanding compliance issues or taxes on
Two Class
Upscale
2s.
Autos and Capellini.
Correct.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Okay, great. Right of first refusal, Dunham Farms condominiums. Mary, I'm going to cue that up to you.
Okay, this is one of the affordable units at Dunham Farms, which is at 902 Main Street. It's Unit 6. This was one of the original units that was sold at the time when the units were built. The original owner has passed away. The family wants to sell the unit, so they need to put us on notice that they want to sell it. The town has the opportunity to purchase it if it was inclined, or we have to vote to waive the town's right of first refusal. That will set things in motion that the estate can then sell the property, and it goes to the housing authority, and they seek out people who qualify as affordable purchasers. So by waiving our right to purchase it, they can start that. We've sold several units up there. Only one unit, actually, they were not able to find a qualified purchaser, so it went out at a market rate and it was sold. And the additional money over and above the affordable rate, the town actually gets. It doesn't go to the seller. So, but it was only like $7,000. So we've had this in a housing account for years. So I am confident that they'll be able to find a qualified buyer. So we just need a vote to waive your right of first refusal.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Okay. Requests for Camp Kalani.
That was just in case we had any.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't have anything, and I don't know if I'm losing it. Okay. And then that brings us to appointments and resignations. And we have an appointment, Heidi Buck?
Back is how it's pronounced.
I knew I was a 50-50 on that. From Dayton as the administrative assistant to the planning board. Mary?
We only received 2 applications for this position. I think it's mainly because it's between 16 and 19 hours. So I did interviews with the 2 candidates along with the town planner, Deb Petty, and the chairman of the planning board, Don Ellis. Both of the candidates were really great people. We could have gone either way, but Heidi brings to the table years of experience in Dayton with respect to planning. She was on the planning board at one time. She worked for the planning board. She's been on the open space committee, community preservation committee. So she has a lot of background, municipal background, that will be very helpful to not only the board, but to Deb as well, since she's relatively new to the municipal world. So I would recommend that the board vote my recommendation, subject to a Corey check and a pre-employment physical and a background check.
I will say it's quite refreshing to see somebody with this amount of volunteer experience on municipal boards. We just don't see it that often.
Right.
Applying for a position. Mm-hmm. So I will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? And again, pending the background check and
right.
All of that. Okay. Now we are moving on to John Stanbrook, Records Access Officer. I'm wondering if, in the interest of time, so that poor Mr. Cahill doesn't have to sit through any more of this painful experience, if we might not change up the order and
go right ahead.
Do Matt Cahill's appointments to Drainage Committee for a term to expire 6/30/21, Highway Building Committee for a term to expire 6/30/21, Parks and Fields Commission for a term to expire 6/30/22, Trench Inspector, that sounds like fun, for a term to expire 6/30/23, and Records Access Officer. I will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Okay.
Mary, am I still on the Drainage Committee?
No, you're on the Trench Committee now.
No.
I'm thinking Matt could use help on that one.
What I went through the database, since we have new people, obviously, and so I just figured this would be the best time to do these appointments. Yes, you're still on the Drainage Committee. I believe you were on there. And so the annual appointments will come up in June. And instead of just adding them to, in a few months, I just gave them a year out. So they will be your regulars.
Okay. Matt, we'll be talking.
Great.
Last time they had a drainage committee meeting was in 1998. So we should have one soon.
Well, and you know, the stormwater, and all joking aside, the stormwater management, a lot of the deadlines for that type, you know, for our compliance are
Yes.
upon us.
Yeah.
If not looming in the very near future. So we're glad to have somebody with your experience. We hope all is going well. Your first official day was 1/2.
Yes. Yeah, no, very well so far, getting adjusted. Everything's going great, thank you.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you. And you may, I don't know, what's your under over on tonight? Are we getting any accumulation or?
I think I'll be in probably around midnight, just to make sure.
Okay,
We'll see how things go,
good answer.
in case Dave's watching.
Well, have a piece of cake and go take a nap.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Yep, thank you.
That brings us to the appointments for John Stanbrook, Records Access Officer, no expiration date, ADA Coordinator, and I'm anxious, John, to get that jump started again. And with a term to expire 6/30/23. Economic Development Committee, another one I'm excited to get going on, 6/30/23. Disabilities Committee, 6/30/23. Oldham Pond Committee, 6/30/23. I will entertain a motion.
That's mine, John.
That's yeah.
You and I will be talking.
So moved.
Second.
You're making friends and influencing people. All in favor? Okay, great. We don't have Kate here yet to discuss the school assessment matter.
So do you want me to jump to my report?
We will move to the town administrator report.
Okay. Just want to start out with Happy New Year to everyone. We made it to 2020, and happy birthday, Hanson. I was going to put that on the board, but it was raining, so I didn't. Personnel matters, obviously met, started on Thursday the 2nd, and a huge thank you to Kurt McLean. It was a really good transition. He did a great job, and he wanted me to pass along his thanks to the board to give him the opportunity. He really
Thanks to us. Are you kidding me? We're not worthy.
He has come in the office at least a half a dozen times. It would say, "Thank you, I'm having a blast." He really enjoyed it. So, you know, thank you to Kurt, and we're glad to have Matt on. They came in and visited me on Friday and just brought me up to speed. Kurt brought him around to other communities, took him to Hanover, took him to East Bridgewater. He met with the 2 chiefs. He met with the water superintendent, and I did ask him to stop by and see one of the former members of the Board of Selectmen and Water Commissioner, Don Howard, to meet with him, because I know how important this is to Don. So,
And he's already doing a great job. Today, I had some complaints from folks that were up near the old JJ's on East Washington about Columbia Gas being there, and that they didn't know why Columbia Gas was there. And Matt got right on it and tracked it down and went and spoke to them and made sure that they're going to be patching it the way that we need it to be patched. And he's a real advocate, and I think he's really going to be an asset. So
absolutely, absolutely. Today, I came in late today, but Dory Jameson would have started today. Billy actually got a nice Christmas gift of going away for a weekend and was not aware of it, so she was originally supposed to start yesterday. But since Billy wasn't there, we had her start today, and I'm sure everything went off well. She stopped in and saw me on Thursday and was very enthusiastic and looking forward to starting. So she'll be a good addition down the recreation. She has a great background, and so I'm looking forward to her getting up and running. And then John is here, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am about that. So I was sorry I wasn't able to take him around yesterday, and I plan on spending some time and going around town. He's had an opportunity to meet a lot of people, but I am thrilled that he is here, and he and Greer are going to make a great team. So I'm happy with that. And meetings, the MMA, since you're going, Laura, that you will be we don't have to do any appointments, just so you know how this process works. In the past, if only one board member went and the chairman did not go, the board would be required to vote the one person who was going and who was going to attend the meeting as the town's designee to vote. So we don't have to do that since Laura's going. Wage and personnel meeting it was in the announcements, we're meeting next Tuesday. This is just a shout out to everybody who has wage and personnel staff. If you have anything you want on the agenda, please let us know so we can add it for Thursday, so for posting on Friday. The cell tower hearing is going on right now, and that's where Kate is. So hopefully when Kate gets back, she can comment on it. And I must have gotten distracted because I said I'll be having a meeting with somebody. Oh, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow with Whitman about the school assessment.
Can you just bring everybody up to speed on where we're at with the auditor? And I've had a brief conversation with Mr. Stanbrook yesterday about it.
Okay. So we had someone in mind who was Todd, our town accountant, suggested he might be a good person to do the audit for the school. I had a conversation with him last week, maybe the week before. Gave him the information we had. I sent him out a little request for proposals or quotes, and for a person who was just retired, he listed off about 15 things that he's actually involved in. So after I sent him the information, he got back to me and said that he would not be able to do the audit for us, and said he may be able to, gave us some names. So I don't have any names for the group for tomorrow. I did pass that information along to Frank over in Whitman to see if he had some people that might be able to do it. And I also put together, I requested some regional agreements from, I know you got the stuff from one of the Whitman selectmen, but that were all the regional agreements, whereas we really need to focus on regional agreements between 2 communities or maybe 3, because it just gets a little convoluted and we're trying to get our comparisons in there. So I've made 6 copies so we could pass them out at the meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
And we talked about this and I didn't have a chance to do it, but I think maybe Laura and I spoke about sending a letter to the school saying that we're looking to have this audit done and Whitman supports this, and that we're hoping that they will open up their books so when the auditor does come in, we can just make this a smooth audit and get the information in a timely fashion, because time is of the essence, so we can figure out where the money is going and what we may need to do if adjustments need to be made and what we can afford when we do the budget.
Because we are united, Whitman and Hanson, in being committed to looking at the books to see where money is being spent, and and kind of ticking and tying that to the asks that we've got before us, and so. I don't want to hire an auditor only to find that we're not going to have full access to those records. And I'm not suggesting that's the case, but I just want to make sure. So I don't know, did you need a formal vote of the board to do a letter of that sort?
You can if you want. It's just to send a letter requesting their cooperation. And
okay, then I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and so we will be meeting tomorrow, and I think probably, to be honest with you, the last meeting that we had really focused on what we would be asking an auditor to look at when the school is audited. We came up with a punch list of items, and that was really our primary, I think that's pretty much all we talked about, and I anticipate that's primarily what we'll talk about tomorrow as well. I'm thrilled to have John joining the party, if you will, because of your finance director background. And, when I spoke to John yesterday, he said this is a very specialized discipline to be able to audit school books. It's not your garden variety auditor that you're looking for. It's not just a typical governmental auditor who's able to say, yes, they've spent what they took, yada, yada. It's a much more specialized discipline. So it may not be easy to find this person, but we need to find the right person to do the job. We don't want to hire somebody that isn't specialized in this. So I think probably after tomorrow we'll see how it goes, but my sense is that at that point, and I'm not sure what we've been sort of talking about, and I'll get into this later, but what we've been sort of talking about in those meetings is we really can't talk about opening up the regional agreement and talking about the regional agreement until we have the results from the audit. There's just nothing to talk about. We don't know where the money's being spent. So it's like, how are we going to open it up and even begin a dialogue of apportioning costs if we don't know what those costs are? So the audit really is the prelude to the rest of the conversation, and that's why we've really been focusing on it. And I think once we get the auditor in place and get them focused on the things that we want, there'd be really, I think from that point on, we'll probably just have open meetings and have conversations with people about it, just talking about what we've found, and then, and get into the kind of negotiations of what that regional agreement might look like. But that's the other piece of getting the copies of the other two-party regional agreements so that we can see how were some of those other agreements structured that didn't go strictly statutory and came up with some other modified method. And there are other school districts that have done it, and so we're going to take a look at that, get the audit findings, and then see where we can go from there. So, sorry, I didn't mean to hoodwink your report. I don't know if you were.
Thank you.
Okay.
We received the notice about the Chapter 90 funds. Hanson will receive $353,909 plus an additional $32,174,000 as a result of some new legislation. So Matt Cahill has received a copy of the notice. The Sargent property, which we voted in October, that has been completed. The deeds were done. I took them to the registry on Friday, so that is finished. It's just a matter of sending the check to Mr. Sargent. So that is, I got that off my list of things that I wanted to do. Another thing that was on my list is 0 Liberty Street. That's the parcel on Liberty Street across from the middle school. That RFP, I did not want to use the one that we'd had before. I wanted to check it, and it went to town council. They reviewed it. They made some changes to it. They also provided a purchase and sales agreement as part of the packet. That will be advertised in Central Register tomorrow, and it's available. I actually sent the packets out to the people who have expressed an interest in it, and the deadline for those proposals is Monday, February 10th, and it has to be in the Central Register for 30 days. So that fit in the timeline, and then I figured since there is a meeting on the 11th, the award could be made at that meeting and kind of move that along. So it'd be nice to get that off the ground. We received, I got an email from Deb Petty that we received $18,000 for hazard mitigation plan. She says this is in addition to the $6,000 that we've already received. She'll be handling those funds because we had gotten some of the money to start this, the MVP work. So that was a good thing. She had run that by Laurie at Oak Colony Planning and said that these funds can be piggybacked on the previous funds we've received. So that gives us an opportunity to get moving on that. Indian Head boiler replacement. We'd had some issues with it back and forth on the equipment and the bid process. Well, it's finally been put out to bid. Unfortunately, the project is not going to be completed. We'll be using the Green Communities funds for that, but you have to have all this money spent out by February, and it's not going to be done by then. So we'll get the project done, but we just won't be able to get any money for this round for the Green Communities. Deb, we were a little disappointed in that, but we'll focus on that going forward next year. But we will hopefully get that project done sooner rather than later.
No way to get that wrapped up?
No.
No human way possible?
No.
Got a couple weeks?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
And just a reminder to everybody out there who's listening, the annual town reports are due Friday, if you can get them to Greer, so we can start assembling the annual town report. And I think, let me just look at my notes. And this is my last town administrator's report, so I will thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's attention, and really, you paid attention to what I had to say. It was nice. Whether you really cared or not, I don't know.
No, we
It's like,
can't.
Move this along, Mary.
Don't start
But,
crying on us, Mary.
No. I mean, there were days it's like, Greer, what have we done for the last 2 weeks? What do I need to write down? So this afternoon, it's like, oh my gosh. So
We have a lot to say to you, but we are not going to say it this evening.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yes, we have many, many fond wishes to give you. And appreciative thanks for stepping in. And stepping in just doesn't even seem like an adequate description of what you did.
I agree.
You basically saved our bacon.
well, no, it was fun.
So we really appreciate it. A question for you. Any update on that sleeper property on that whole,
Oh,
which
I
is the property
wish
that
Phil
we
were
acquired?
still here. We were talking about that. I had asked Phil about it because I thought there was something we needed to do on the legal end, and he did tell me that there's some more work that needs to be done, I believe, on the recreation, open space plan. So that can be filed, so then we can actually get the money. And he was checking into that because according to the state website, it said that the Hanson's plan has been approved through 2024.
Right.
And we just want to make sure that all the ducks are in a row. We have the money, but before they actually release it, they have various steps that they follow.
All right, so he's saying in order for us to get that land grant of the, we were awarded the grant, but in
Right,
order
but
for
actually
them to
to
cut the check.
release it, right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
And we're looking to meet on Monday.
Okay, so but that's moving forward, and I did check with Kate, say what do we need to do next, and Phil chimed in and said there are a couple of things we need to do on our
Okay.
end, but that was not forgotten, that had been out there.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm wondering, I don't know who I can prevail upon to check on Kate and when she might, I know she's probably in a semi-contentious discussion about the cell tower upstairs, but we do have her on
It looks
the,
like she's gone.
So if you want to do your report.
we'll just keep
One-day license.
Yeah, one-day license?
Yep. So I will entertain a motion on the one-day liquor license.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We didn't have the minutes, right?
Right, Greer wanted to table those.
200th anniversary committee.
Was that a vote, 5-0
Yes.
for the liquor
Yep.
license?
Yep.
We didn't actually vote.
All right, sorry.
Okay.
You're really moving this.
All in favor? We did have a first and second. Come on, guys, it's tough crowd tonight.
I haven't lost it yet.
Thank you. 200th anniversary committee we've got a lot going on. We've been reaching out to various departments and Historical Society, Historic Commission to get all kinds of memorabilia for our 200th anniversary gala on February 22nd at Lakeside Villa. Several of us went today to Lakeside Villa to check out the layout and kind of figure out the, where everything would go. Sales are very brisk. We've sold almost half of the 200 tickets that need to, that we've got available. So do not hesitate, because this is one of those events that you really can't hesitate to buy your ticket. We also have had extremely robust sales in the weeks leading up to Christmas at the Thomas Mill. Several of us, led by Audrey Flanagan, were selling swag for the Hanson 200th, and it was very popular, and people really seemed to appreciate it and loved the items. We've got all kinds of events coming up. You really just need to check the Facebook page and you'll see the list of events that are coming up. But the very first event will be on the anniversary of the town's founding, which will be February 22nd. With that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Dyer, to give us an update on the final Plymouth County Hospital Reuse Committee.
Well, as you guys heard first, you guys approved the Bay Circuit Trail to be put up on the property, and we appreciate that. Last week, we made a lot of progress on drafting where we want resources up at the park, being like a play area, parking and whatnot. So we're making a lot of headway there. We're meeting again tomorrow to kind of start finalizing and actually send this off to land planning so they can send us back a draft plan for us to come to the board for your approval and do a community outreach meeting or two.
That's exciting.
So really exciting things, and as promised, we're going to have something for you at the town meeting in May.
Great. you know where we stand on that issue. Okay, McQuon School Reuse Committee, when is our next meeting with them? I did see that they are trying to reach out to John and bring you into the fold of McQuon and bring you up to speed, so that's fantastic. But has the RFI actually been issued?
I looked at the email really quick. I did not get the impression that it's gone out.
I don't think it's gone out, but I'd have to
I
look at it.
think he said, was it the 15th?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why. I thought we were there after our last meeting.
Really attempting to be the person I want to be right now, and holding my tongue, so I'm just going to move right along. Okay, well, let me know what you find out on that and when we might be meeting next. Mr. Mitchell.
We meet this Thursday at 5. I've invited John. It's nice to welcome him with a couple quick meetings.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna come. I have an appointment with him at 4, so I'll come and meet with him, sit with him for an hour before our highway meeting. I'll bring him up to speed and stuff, and then we'll go to the highway department. So that'll be Thursday. So I'll have an
Yeah, you're going to
update
have
for you
all
next
kinds
time.
of fresh perspectives. You've got John, you've got Matt, you've got all kinds of
I need the
perspectives.
procurement guy in this one.
Yeah. Okay, great. So.
But I do have a question for the young lady in the back row. Yeah, you. What are you making?
Making a blanket.
It looks fun. You haven't looked down. You just knitting. Oh, me.
Don't mind me. I'm just trying to keep an agenda here. Don't mind me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just curious. You know, it looks warm.
Okay.
Okay.
So what did Kate indicate?
Down momentarily.
Okay. Okay, so Mary, can you refresh my memory? What were we going to talk to Kate about? I think we just wanted to kind of talk to her about what our options are.
The process on going forward, we'll do the best we can with the audit and find out what we can find out, but what's actually going to happen? We're going to vote a number, and we may not vote what the school is asking for, and if it doesn't go forward, then Whitman will be voting their number, and that was a process we wanted to talk to her about, how this whole process works. I don't want to step on any toes, but when I was doing my calls to the other communities, and now I haven't had a chance to look at my notes, but one of the communities has just been taken over by the state. She told me that they voted down the budget, the other town voted for it, back and forth. They did not have a tent meeting, but the state, they had gone forward with a budget that they had, and then the state took over. So I can give her a call and get additional detail on that, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to look at my notes to see which community it was, but I just thought that was interesting. I told them what our situation was here, and then it's actually has happened. And you know, they're just doing, the state's doing their thing. They're putting the budget together, and they're paying what they need to pay.
So just so you guys know, what I had asked Mary, and I had thrown a question, I believe I asked her to share, but if I didn't then, but what I had asked Kate and Jay, our council, was I understand that the school committee has voted to use the statutory method. And at the risk of being impolite, I do want to remind everybody that we still have an agreement in place, and that agreement has not terminated. It's still in effect. And so the school committee has taken their position. We know where Whitman stands, and that they are, their FinCom and their Board of Selectmen are united in advocating for a statutory method. And so it seems to me that we control the warrant. And so my question was, I understand that the school committee has voted statutory, and I also understand that Whitman is voting that way, and I can certainly see the writing on the wall. I'm not, naive that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to feel comfortable knowing that there's still a regional agreement in place voting for statutory as a selectman. I just don't think it's in the best interest of our citizens, and I also, or the town, and I also believe that my preference would have been for negotiations to be opened up prior to these votes being taken and for people deciding that we were going to go statutory. And it didn't, and I can't do anything about that now, but it doesn't mean I'm going to go quietly into that night and say, oh, I'm okay with statutory, because I'm not okay with statutory. So again, still continuing with the path of trying to figure out what we're going to do in the future with the regional agreement. But that's not going to be a short-term fix, and it's not going to get us in any place by May that's different than where we are now. So, not too much pressure. You're literally the last item on our agenda. We have talked ourselves out at this point.
Oh my goodness.
So, Kate, I was actually just letting these guys know why we'd asked you to come, that we have the school committee has voted to use the statutory method. Whitman has, I don't know, they have taken a formal vote. Both FinCom and their Board of Selectmen have taken a formal vote that they're going to advocate and support nothing but statutory. But knowing that, we are in discussions about having a school audit that's going to hopefully provide some insight into where costs are being apportioned, so that when we do move forward and open up that regional agreement to renegotiate the terms, that we are armed with facts. So my question, and where we're kind of going on with this, is I can't in all good conscience say that I'm in favor of the statutory method. We still have a regional agreement. It's still in place. I understand why people have taken the positions that they've taken, respective positions that they've taken, and they're doing the job they think they need to do, but we have a job that we think we need to do, which is for the best interests of the citizens of Hanson, and that would not be for us to adopt the statutory method. In my estimation, I'm just one person. And so my question is, I'm trying to play this out in my mind, because we are opening up the warrant and we're going to start deciding, how things get positioned in there. My question is, what are our options as a Board of Selectmen if we're presented with a budget that is based on statutory, and yet we know that we have an agreement that's still in place? What are our potential plays that we can make?
So the way it works is the school committee, right, they present a budget to you. And they present it to both legislative bodies, both town meetings, and you take it. There's usually some back and forth negotiation, because everyone wants to get the budget approved, right? Because when you don't approve the budget, a whole bunch of other automatic processes go into place. So that's why there's a lot of horse trading and stuff right before town meeting. Okay, where are we on the budget, and what can we all get behind? And that's the whole purpose of it, because ultimately, and I'll go through that process, but ultimately you don't want to have the state take over your school as a general matter. So the statutory method is the default method, despite the fact that these two towns have gotten together, and they got together way before the statutory method was created. Despite the fact that the two towns got together and they decided how they were going to split it, and they drafted up an agreement which binds them. After that occurred, this change in the law occurred. And this new idea about how to calculate and what's the fairest method to calculate the apportionment came about. So if the school committee presents to you its budget, and it is the statutory method,
which is what they're saying they're going to do.
Your option is to vote it down, and then they don't have an approved budget.
Okay.
And so because you're two towns, when any one town votes a budget down, it goes back to the school committee. And the school committee has three options. Well, they can vote what you want to give. So if they're asking for, and I'm just going to throw out a number that doesn't make sense, but $5 million, and you say, I'm only gonna give you $4 million, they can decide, am I gonna accept that? Or am I gonna go back and say, no, here's a new assessment?
Now, when you say you vote, do you mean town meeting?
Meeting, town
Okay,
meeting.
just want to clarify.
Town meeting.
Okay.
Should I go up there, or am I okay here?
No,
I
you're
think-
good.
I think you're fine.
You're on camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the town meeting can vote that budget down, and the school committee can decide, am I gonna accept that budget, or am I gonna go back and present a new budget? They can go back and negotiate something different and say.
Can we just put the brakes on right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Got that part.
Yep.
As far as inclusion in the warrant and how it's presented at town meeting, what are our options? Must we present it in the way that the school, I know some of these answers, he's a leading witness in a way, but, must we present it in the way that it's being given to us? Do we have an option to put a budget in there for the school that is different than what they are asking us for?
So the school presents you the budget, and you put it in the warrant that way.
Right.
And your options are at town meeting are to amend that budget. So I move to amend to approve this budget, less $1 million.
Could we include theirs and include an alternate that we're presenting?
So I think that would have to be in the form of a motion, though, to amend it.
Okay,
That's the way I would do it.
okay.
Can I just say something here? And this may change, and with John here, he may say, you guys should do this differently. But as I explained to Laura, when the budget goes out, we have the list of all the line items, and it's a requested from all the departments.
Yes.
And then we always, when the moderator reads it, he reads the FinCom's recommendations.
Right.
So FinCom can say, they may want, in your terms, $5 million, and FinCom can say, we're only recommending $4 million.
Right.
That would be the way we would address.
Yeah, and
We're telling the people what they're actually asking for.
Yep.
And then we're voting FinCom's recommendation, which I would expect
Which
the
will hopefully be in
board would be
lockstep with,
on board with.
That's right, that's
Yeah.
right. And that's how you move it.
Okay.
Right. So when the moderator reads the line of 124 for $4 million, we can say, somebody, I can promise you, will hold it, and then, for discussion, even though they'll see in the requested column, they're looking for 5 million, and somebody may say, I want to reduce it down to 3 million or whatever.
And remember, too, school side, you're only voting the bottom line. So your audit will be helpful to inform the public, and maybe they can speak to the school committee, but regardless of what's approved, you just vote the bottom line and they decide how to spend the money. So you may think, I don't know, whatever program is less important, and we can make our motion based on the following cuts that we see, but it doesn't mean that they have to follow that.
Okay, so can we continue through the path? So we do this methodology of FinCom, et cetera, and I believe that probably it would be the FinCom amount that would get approved by town meeting, which would not be the amount that the school committee had requested. So now walk us through that.
So then the school committee, they say, okay, here's Hanson's pot of money that they've agreed to provide us, and we are either going to accept that or we're not going to accept it, and we're going to come back to you with a different assessment. And that would, again, you would have to react to that if you wanted to reject their newly created assessment, right? So you would have to convene another town meeting, it would be a special, and vote it up or down, okay? And then, as you know, you're always coming up against that July 1st deadline, and July 1st is the important deadline, the first important deadline, rather. And if you have these various votes that are occurring and you come up against that July 1st deadline, what happens is automatically there's a 1/12 budget. And what that means is they take last year's budget And they divide it in 12 parts, and that's your assessment, because after July 1st, you wouldn't be able to pay your bills if you didn't have an appropriation, right? So that occurs automatically regardless of what town meeting happens if we come against that July 1st deadline. So.
And that's the statutory method,
And that's the
1/12.
statutory
Yeah.
method,
Okay.
exactly, Laura. So, and so then you still have, so you're operating just on this kind of smaller budget than probably is what's requested, and you're moving along and you still don't have an approved budget, and that's when you can have the big tent meeting, which is the district-wide meeting, which is both towns, so whoever fills that stadium is there making the decision. Both towns come together and have a big meeting, a big town meeting, a joint one. And at that district meeting, it's again using the statutory method.
And what percent of, is that a majority vote or 2/3 vote?
So that would be a majority vote.
Okay.
Okay, and so after the big tent, perhaps you have an approved budget, and if you don't have, if you have motions flying and whatever, and nothing passes, and you decide to dissolve the meeting, who knows, you have the next really big deadline, and that's December 1st. If you don't have a budget approved by December 1st, that's when the state swoops in and the Department of Education takes over your schools.
I'm sorry, can we back up the truck a little bit?
Yep, yep.
So at the first, quote, tent meeting,
Yep.
which would be based on statutory, am I permitted to offer an amendment on the floor to that methodology?
So, yes, it's a town meeting, so you could.
Okay.
Yeah, so it really depends who shows up there, right? That's the important piece.
But it's not necessarily the methodology, methodology.
It's the
that
dollar
you're-
amount.
It's the dollar amount. So
But
you
I
wouldn't
could
get
use the
into
methodology to get to the
figure out
dollar.
the,
Yeah.
to figure out the assessment,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's not, you just gonna be talking about a number.
Yeah.
And then people are gonna say, how'd you arrive at that? It's because, well,
Yeah, so, right, oh, that's a good point, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're voting the number, and remember, it's the entire, at that point, it's the entire budget. And they're not deciding the apportionment, because the apportionment by law
I
is the
see.
statutory method.
Okay.
So you couldn't, I'm sorry.
So I could
wasn't getting
amend
that.
to a dollar amount that was lower, but it wouldn't necessarily translate to Hanson paying the per pupil as we would have under the agreement.
Right, the motion
Okay.
couldn't be, I move to make the apportionment the alternative method. It
Right.
couldn't be that. It would be, I move to reduce the amount by
Okay.
$10 million or whatever.
All right, thanks for clarifying
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, oh, I wasn't getting that, Laura,
Yeah.
thank you. So, yeah, so that's it. I mean, and that's the worst case scenario. It's happening in regional districts right now where the state has taken over. It's not a good place to be in, I wouldn't recommend it. That they pay all the bill, nothing gets done without the state signing off.
And I get, that Christine Lynch was extremely helpful at one of the school committee meetings from DESE in describing essentially what you've said.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she said is, look, it behooves everybody to not litigate, to not get up in arms, not get all over exercised about it, but to try to renegotiate and try to come up with something that you can live with. And so that is the path that we're kind of going down.
Right.
But again, it's not a short-term fix. It's not going to do anything about the amounts that we're going to be assessed in May. So we've got to kind of figure out what we're going to
Okay,
do.
Kate, can I,
Unless there was a gentleman's agreement, well, if the school committee's already voted, I mean.
They did already vote.
Yeah, so then the negotiation part is sort of over. And
For this year. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because otherwise then the battles become at the various legislative bodies. Yeah.
so Kate, I just need clarification. On July 1st,
Yep.
when we automatically take next year's budget and turn it into 1/12 of this year's budget.
Yeah.
And default is statutory, so that's where we go. So if our finance committee has said up to this point, we can only afford $4,000, but 1/12 is going to put us at because we're gonna go statutory. So it changes the dynamic there. So we have no choice but to pay $4,700. If that's what the apportionment, the assessment comes down to, we have no choice at that point. Laura's choice is that we amend the budget down by a significant amount to try to get it back down to FinCom's. This is as much as we can do.
Yeah, so there's really no choice with that budget. So, but this is actually really interesting legal boundary that DOR and DESI are there's a little bit of a conflict of law there, right? Because DOR says you can't do anything without an appropriation.
Exactly. That's where I think you were going, right?
Yeah.
Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Yes.
Yeah.
So this has actually played out. So they say you can't do anything without an appropriation. And going down, if they took over and let's face it, sometimes DESI gives a bigger budget than what was requested, right? So then you're even in more of a financial strain. You have that assessment that's imposed by DESI, and DOR says, hey, there's no appropriation here, but this is statutory that DESI has this authority. So there's a little bit of a conflict of laws here, but DESI has prevailed. So
I think the sad part of this is that realistically, the kids are being held hostage
Yep.
in this. This is not, in the end, it's not even Whitman versus Hanson.
No.
Yeah.
It's one town has taken a position right now that says, if the kids get screwed and the state take over, that's okay with us.
Yeah, that is
because
it.
we're not budging.
And never mind progress. We'll be lucky if they're able to even keep the same.
Oh, they won't.
You know?
No,
I mean,
I don't think there's ever been a school budget that survived on last year's budget for the year.
well, look at any collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
They usually don't begin
Clearly.
with zeros.
Right.
So
yeah.
I have a question.
Mr. Mitchell.
So when the school committee voted, does that vote have to be a majority or 2/3?
Good question.
the school committee is a majority vote.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we did get various
Yeah.
opinions on that. People thought
Because
that
it was
maybe it
finance,
should
they
be
thought it
two-third.
might have been 2/3. so-
Oh, wait, actually, I'm taking it back. I'm actually taking that back. School committee is 2/3. It's town meeting that's a majority.
Okay, because when they
School
voted,
committee was 4-6.
That was for the method, not the budget.
The school committee was
That's for the
4/6.
they were talking about the method, not.
Which
Yeah,
is 2/3.
talking the method.
4/6 equals 2/3, last time I checked, right?
yeah,
Right.
that's
yeah.
why I'm asking.
Yeah, so it's 2/3.
Like Tracy said, but that was for the methodology when they voted.
It wasn't the actual budget.
Oh,
It
it's
was
not
just
the
the
budget.
budget.
Right,
No.
right.
Yeah, so, but that's just talking. I mean, what the important vote is when they vote the actual budget, and that's 2/3, which is 4/6, my math, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't it?
Okay, I see what she's saying. So she's saying once they get to the budget part,
No, well, 6/10 is 3/5. That's not a 2/3 vote, it's
It
a
would be 6 out of
3/5
9.
vote.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
I think it's a majority vote at the school committee.
No, you thought I was saying it was 4 out of
6
10
members.
were our Hanson and 6 out of 10 are Hanson. I mean, Whitman,
Whitman,
6-10,
Yeah.
4-10.
If it's a 2/3, they didn't have it.
6/10 is 2.
3/5.
Okay.
3/5
I don't know. Well, let's
and
leave
2/5.
Let's leave the math, but whether or not they're trying to vote, they're trying to get a sense of the board, right? They're trying to get a sense of what they're gonna start working on, because they actually have to start putting the budget together.
Right.
So they're just taking a vote of, should we go alternative or statutory? Whether or not they can actually pass that budget in their committee is a different thing. So
Okay.
you're
Right.
saying it was
Okay.
just on one versus the other, not
Right.
the actual budget?
Right.
So it's doing the math, 3/5 is less than 2/3. So when the time comes for the budget vote, are you saying that has to be a 2/3 vote?
Yeah, I believe it's.
yeah, because it's
If that's
finance.
true, then a 3/5 vote does not cut.
Does not carry.
So so break that down to members. So how
Yes.
many members would they need to pass that budget,
7.
Mr. Bloss? 7 out of 10.
I trust
Okay.
your math.
Seven out of 10 would be
So
more
that
than
means somebody from
two-thirds.
Okay,
Hanson's going to
all
have to
right,
flip
and 6
this.
does not make it.
And 6 does not
If
make
it's
it.
two-thirds, if it's majority.
I think it's when it's the finance, I thought it was 2/3, when you're talking about money.
So, well, that's usually for borrowing, but it's weird because it goes 2/3 the school committee, and then for your town meeting, it's majority.
Could you check into that
Can you
first?
double check,
Yeah,
because
and
this is
get that,
critical.
because
This
it
is
is,
critical.
I agree with Laura, that is critical.
And the reason it's critical, Kate, is because we've got this composition on the school committee that hamstrings us. We're
Yeah.
perpetually hamstrung. There's literally nothing we can do about it. But that brings me to my other question, which I think I've asked you before, but I'm just going to keep asking until I get the question, the answer I want. Right now, there's 10 members, 6 are Whitman, and 4 are Hanson. Okay?
Okay,
Yep.
6 are Whitman, 4 are Hanson.
And one of the things that really sticks in people's craw is like, okay, well, maybe we can't do anything about the statutory versus the per pupil for now. But it seems to quite a few people, if we're going to pay more, shouldn't we have more representation on that school committee?
Yeah.
So, and then we'll be in perpetual stalemate because it'll be 5-5 and we'll never, have any decisions. But at least we'll feel better about it. But I think I heard that it's based on per pupil.
It's generally based on per pupil, but if you were to amend that, it would have to be done through the agreement, and the Whitman side would never vote that. And there's, they wouldn't vote that.
Right.
It's as a general matter, always per pupil, in every agreement I've ever seen.
Okay, but it's not by you're not saying it's not by statute, it's that way.
I don't think it's I think that's per agreement.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, Laura. And I've never seen any other agreement be different.
But Kate, you just said that fluctuates.
It fluctuates.
So it's
I have
some
one
years
agreement where it
they go back and forth with their
fluctuates.
membership?
Yes, they do. So I have one town where it fluctuates
You've
in
never
the
done that.
agreement, and it's based on the last year's enrollment. Yeah, and usually it doesn't
Wow.
fluctuate enough to kick a person off. But there's a whole process spelled out in the agreement that I'm thinking of, whereby if the membership has to switch. Yeah, it's interesting. So that's a point.
Beth will love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's not going to happen.
Right. Let's not hang our hats on that, right?
I mean, I just want to say in the end, for all of us, in Hanson and in Whitman, it's the kids who are going to pay for this. Their futures, their education is on the line,
Yep.
and we are coming into a hostage situation.
Yeah.
It
And
is, yeah.
we did not perpetuate that situation.
No, and it's pitting one town against the other when we really should be trying to pull together and figure out what we can do together. If you want to state your name and address.
Karina Fado, 73 Winslow Drive, Hanson. Going back to when you were talking about procuring an auditor, when you were talking to the other regional school systems and their situations, is it possible to see if they contracted an auditor to
Sure.
review their situation, and maybe they could make a suggestion to speed along the process?
That's a good
Good idea.
suggestion. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. If you could state your name and
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, Jane Durante, Hanson. If you're saying the statutory method is what we all should be doing in the state of Massachusetts?
No, I didn't say that.
Just clarify this, because the per pupil, that's going out the door?
No. So let me be clearer.
You said it was the
It wasn't.
default method.
It's the default. So that means, oh, I'm falling apart here. Hang on. You've gotten me flustered. So that's the default method, meaning that absent an agreement among the towns, that's the method you use. So what happens is, and the woman from DESE, Christine Lynch, explained it really well, is way back in the 90s when that education reform happened, and they decided we want to revisit how we look at funding schools. And what they determined is they created, this statutory method didn't exist before, And they created this method to make it, I guess, fair in their minds, because what they do, so maybe I should describe what the difference between statutory and alternative method means, right? So statutory method means you have a certain minimum funding for the schools that's set by the state, okay? And that minimum funding under the statutory method is based on a calculation made by the state. And what the state does is they've got all these different criteria. So they have like what your property value is, what your average annual income is, and all of these other wealth factors. And they decide, based on those factors, which town can afford more, right? So they do that for just the minimum part. And then above that line, because the schools always ask for more, because the minimum really doesn't, make the school float very well. So anything above that is based on your agreement, which typically, and in the case of Hanson, is per pupil. Whereas the alternative method says, no, we're going to let the agreement govern, and the agreement tells us the entire budget, so say you've got a $5 million budget, the entire budget is based on per pupil calculation. So that's the difference between the two. And what the law says is that if you can't agree, then the statutory method is the default. That's the one that will be applied.
For the minimum contribution.
For the minimum, and then anything above that line, remember, is always based on per pupil. So it's not...
Well, it's based on the agreement, which in our case is per pupil.
And 90% of it is
Yeah.
per pupil too. So I'm not saying it's the better method or it's the preferred method, because you can do either, but there has to be agreement to do it. Say, to do the alternative. Yeah, so it's just different.
And Kate, couldn't you say there is no the alternative? It's not this is the alternative.
No.
The alternative is whatever the towns in the region decide
Exactly.
how they want to assess.
There's an
That's exactly
infinite number of alternatives.
It more typically is per pupil, just because that is easy, right? And it's logical. But that's what Christine was saying too, that because the state thinks it's better to have agreement between the towns, typically when this problem arises, if there is going to be agreement as opposed to having loggerheads, it's better to make the regional agreement reflect some sort of fiction. So if the town who has the lower statutory method assessment would advocate for that position, but there should be some recognition of how to not shock the budget of the other town.
Right, how to phase into it over a multi-year period.
Exactly, and so you could do that through a regional agreement, say year 1, we agree to this, year 2, we agree to this. But again, those agreements would have to be passed at the town meeting.
And we have discussed that with the...
That's where we were hoping to go
with
with
this, with Mr. Lamatina and Mr. Evans, and we received a very strong message that, at least for this year, they're not willing to do a phase-in. They want the full statutory. So, yes, ma'am, if you could state your name.
Catherine Coakley, Hobby Circle in Hanson. Given that we are being held hostage, all right, and right now we have an agreement based on pupil. They want to change that agreement without negotiating, and it sounds to me like they're not willing to negotiate. They have a steadfast hard stand, we're not doing that. What recourse do we have, since we're the ones that are going to have to put the burden of this major increase in cost to us?
Yeah, so that's not an easy answer to give, because really, if there's no willingness on both sides to work together,
this isn't both sides, this is one side.
Yeah.
One side's been willing to try to work something out.
Right. If there isn't a willingness to work together from the other side, then the best case scenario, I don't even want to use that word, is, I guess the atomic bomb that you throw is to have the state take over the schools. But what does that mean for your finances? It doesn't mean that much more because, again, the statutory method will be used by the state to apportion whatever budget they set. And what the state says is, okay, they work with both towns to set the budget. But what I recently just saw was DESI set a higher budget than what the school committee had asked for. So it's a higher budget, and then...
Are they trying to be punitive in doing that, or?
I don't know why they did it, to be honest. There was a lot of back and forth about the needs, and it was a deep dive into what they really needed, and I think... I shouldn't say what I think they were thinking. Right. But, that's the worst case scenario, right? Because you have the statutory method and you have the potential of a higher budget. So it's not a good answer for you. I'm sorry.
Can you explain how, when you said they do a deep dive into what? DESI does this, a deep dive into what they need.
Yeah.
So DESI does kind of get it, once the state takes over.
Yes.
DESI really does get involved and they determine, we're trying to do this audit.
Yeah.
Finding the right person to do the audit has been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
But is that what they would be deep diving into to see those programs, or is it programs?
They do look at the needs of the school and they consider the financial position of the town too.
Mm-hmm.
So in this circumstance, the town accountant provided a lot of information about, what they had and what their needs were in terms of town resources.
Oh, so they look at the town more than they look at what the school. Okay.
They look at it all.
Okay.
They look at it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't think it was to be punitive in that case. I really can't say.
It just seems odd when you already know that people are at loggerheads to increase the amount that's being given.
Yeah.
When it's already a problem for a lower amount, it seems really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's not a good position.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because, and I think the people in this room know the difference, but throughout this whole conversation, I've heard alternative method and statutory method.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I heard you give the definition, the dictionary definition of what those two words mean.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I did hear you say it a couple of times, one is based on per pupil population.
Purely.
The other is based on wealth of the town.
And for
the
one
minimum
portion.
contribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you know what's helpful, Jim? And I actually have this. So I don't know if you guys might like to see this.
I would.
So
Okay.
this is put out by DESI. And I think the most interesting, because all the other stuff is like, definition and all this stuff. But the important part is flipping to the last page. Oh no, I don't have two. So look at the last page, and that gives using fake numbers, but the actual calculation. So see, it describes the statutory method, and it says, here's the minimum contribution, okay? And the minimum contribution total is $4,000. And that piece of the budget is set based on town's wealth. I mean, I use that term loosely. It's a super complicated formula that I can't clear. I couldn't even do 2/3 to 10/5. It's they consider a ton of different criteria in reaching that. And then anything above that, that's based on your agreement, which in this case is per pupil. Whereas if you look below, they just divide the entire budget based on per pupil. And that's what you guys have been doing the whole time up till this coming year.
Well, we still have a contract.
Yes.
In an agreement.
Yes. Yeah. So this is actually a super interesting point too, to your point, Laura. There's this one, and this hasn't been vetted, so I don't know exactly how it would end up playing out, because this case predated ed reform. But what the case says, and it's like Alphonse or something like that, I don't know what it is. But it says that, listen, you're obligated to a portion based on the regional agreement. It's a contract, right? And this was the case though from the 70s. And so the question becomes, okay, is that first budget, is it incumbent upon the school committee for that first town meeting to present it in the alternative method calculation? And that could be an argument, because that doesn't defy that there's another case that comes after ed reform that says, okay, the statutory method is viable and it supersedes the regional agreement, and that does, that's right in the law, it says notwithstanding the regional agreement. But the question is, at the first pass, do they have an obligation to present it using the alternative method? And I don't know the answer to that.
Because we're in agreement?
Because we have an agreement. I mean, that's the thing, Kate. It's like fundamentally, isn't this a breach of a contract? I mean, if we really break this down, and I get that the statute is to their advantage and DESE is weighed in and all of this other stuff, but fundamentally, I have no issue with having a gentlemanly agreement about apportioning the costs and whether the current regional agreement is apportioning them fairly and all that other stuff. But it just seems to me as though the way that this is set up, we are unfairly disadvantaged. We've got the situation where we've got the 6-4 makeup on the board. We've got the situation where we have an agreement in place, and nobody has come to us and said, in good faith, prior to all these, taking votes on using the statutory method, and nobody has come to us and said, we want to take, we would like to take another look at this. We feel like we're being disadvantaged with the current formula. And yet we're hamstrung. We literally are painted into a corner, and it just doesn't seem like this is equitable or fair or even, and I know the law isn't always fair, but it just seems, it's befuddling to me that this confluence of facts and events would get us to a place where a town literally has very little control over what we're going to spend on our schools.
Yeah.
That's the end result here.
I know what you're saying, and the law just isn't on your side. So there's, the reason why they wrote the new legislation to say notwithstanding the agreement is they wanted to supersede, and they wanted to say this is the way it will happen unless both parties agree to do the alternative.
And I get I understand, there's a lot of dialogue about Chapter 70 funding and wealth and all that other stuff. But one of the things that I'm hoping to get to with the audits is it's much more complex than that. I think it's very simple-minded to simply look at the Chapter 70 and say, well, we're getting more Chapter 70, meaning Whitman, and therefore we're subsidizing you. But if we really peel back the layers of the onion, what we find is that there are 3 schools in Whitman, there are 2 in Hanson. There are significantly larger special education costs in Whitman than there are in Hanson. And so at the end of the day, maybe I'm just being extremely simple-minded about it, but when I look at the revenues that are coming in from the state and the town, revenue from Hanson, state and town, and expenditures, what I do not see is a picture that is extremely inequitable right now with the per pupil.
Yeah.
If anything, I suspect that when we do the audit, we may actually find that we're subsidizing Whitman by way of the special education costs. So I'm just, it's perplexing to me, and it seems counterintuitive that there's no possibility of maneuvering around what I think is really kind of some unfair tactics that are being lobbed our way. And I'm trying to keep an open dialogue, and I'm trying to keep my eye on the ultimate goal, which is to get an agreement in place so that we don't go, as you said, nuclear. I really would like to try to avoid that, and I'd like to try to avoid dividing the community communities more than they already are. I feel like that's our responsibility as a board, as leaders of the community. That's our responsibility to try to do that. It's extremely difficult to do that, and it just defies logic to me that there's, that there's nothing we can do in the way of saying, no, you know what? You need to stick with this agreement until we come up with a different agreement.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I know certainly we're not the first district to go through this, and we won't be the last. And we are hoping to learn from some of the other districts and their experience. But it's probably, I think, the most mystifying dilemma that this board, at least since I've been on it, has had to deal with.
Something awful, because obviously, and for really good reasons, both sides have very strong opinions, right? So it's polarizing. It's too bad.
Yeah, it is polarizing.
Well, I just want to say, Laura, you're going down a one-way street. For there to be a communications, it's got to go both ways.
Well,
and I apologize to the two ladies in the back for not remembering your names, but you were at that meeting at the high school that I was at, and that was a waste of an hour and 40 minutes.
Amen.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, I'm sorry, it's almost like you don't want the state to take over, but you know what? You almost want it to get to that point to make them come to the table.
I have heard people say that.
I mean, I'm sorry to say that, and Mr. Bloss is 100% right. It's the kids, so.
Kenny, you're absolutely right, and Wes said it. The kids are going to be the ones to suffer. But Laura just sat here and spoke and poured her heart out on trying to get this done. And Whitman doesn't want to come to the table.
But that's all right. Can I just say, since I'm totally right about this then clearly, I have so much faith that in the state. I just have so much faith in the state that I know this will work out in the end because the state
cares.
God bless them.
Wow.
When is the $1 million due?
When is it due? Well, it's
Is this the next year's assessment?
Next year.
Yeah.
We're locked in with our budgets.
Yeah.
Okay.
For this year.
But if we.
But next year, July 1st, this coming July 1st.
I mean, it's coming.
We have to pay this extra $1 million. When is the $1 million due? Our share?
It will be part of next year's budget.
Next year's budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you pay it
Which would be-
quarterly per
yeah,
agreement or something like
yeah,
that.
All right.
But the point is.
We don't even actually know what that additional dollar amount is. We don't have an exact dollar amount.
Oh, but they know because at that meeting for an hour and 40 minutes, they discussed it and they said 10.5%. So don't ask me what it's going to cost us when it's $980,000 this year. Don't ask me what it's going to cost us 2 years from now, because those ladies back there heard me say what it was going to cost.
I was just reading also.
Yes, Corinne was there.
You were? I didn't see you.
Yes, she was over in the corner.
I'm sorry.
I was approached by someone from Whitman, who I don't know the name, in this lobby after a meeting. The superintendent came and said, at that time, he said we were 900,000 short. And she told me that the wealthier town should pay for the poorer town, and it was the cost of their special ed budget.
I think that,
Go find.
yeah, as I think I tried to state, I'm trying to stay the course. I'm trying to look at the long term and trying to effectuate positive change. I may not be successful. I can live with that. But if I don't try, I certainly can't.
Can I mention one thing?
Mr. Mitchell.
The $1 million, keep in mind, that's based on this current year's assessment.
Right.
So that $1 million could be 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Who knows what they're gonna ask for?
We don't know. We don't have that dollar amount,
just,
yeah.
again, that $1 million is based on this current year assessment for the school.
Yeah. Mr. Dyer, you have not weighed in. Did you want to say anything, or?
Nope, not at this time.
All right.
You moving to Whitman?
Well, the difficulty too is where you're coming up against 2.5 too. I don't know how much room there was in the budget. I think we were at the cap. in May, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Actually, I asked the accountant,
This-
speaking of money, I was like, are we at the cap? He's like, no, we have like $100. And I was like, what? He wasn't,
yeah.
it wasn't that close.
You're looking
but
at
it was
override, no
very-
question.
Pretty close.
10,000.
It was
10,000.
which is in the rounding, 10,000.
I am optimistic, but I don't see any way around this without an override. And
Yeah.
certainly that isn't anything that we want to do.
Yeah.
Did any, yes, Mary?
Because I wrote this down, I know I'm going to forget. Before Kate leaves, since she just came from the cell tower hearing, I just didn't know if you can give us some update on
Oh,
that.
great idea.
Yeah, they voted to approve with various conditions. Yes.
Conditions that can be met? Be met?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
all really reasonable conditions, for sure. And it was important to protect the children, fencing, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Okay, good.
So,
When did they say they're gonna build it?
I had to run down.
Go back.
Greer yelled at me.
Korea, why did you get her? That's the important part. When's the phone gonna work?
All right, did anybody have any other questions for?
Not really, just wanted to welcome John to town.
Notice we had this discussion after your swearing in, sir.
You can't turn back.
Okay, Kate, well, we appreciate you being here and,
Kate.
you know,
And I'll double check on that vote. I'm
Thank
pretty sure
you.
it's 2/3,
That would be great.
but I'll double check it.
okay, great, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
I have to
Okay.
fight for a
All in
second.
favor? Okay, thank you. Did you have a chance to meet John?
Thanks, everyone.